topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
What's working on purpose anyway? Each week, we ponder the answer to this question. People ache for meaning and purpose at work, to contribute their talents passionately and know their lives really matter. They crave being part of an organization that inspires them and helps them grow into realizing their highest potential. Business can be such a force for good in the world, elevating humanity. In our program, we provide guidance and inspiration to help usher in this world we all want, working on purpose. Now, here's your host, Dr. Elise Cortez.
Welcome back to the Working on Purpose program, which has been brought to you with passion and pride since February of 2015. Thanks for tuning in this week. Great to have you. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. I'm joining you today from McAllen, Texas, where I'm down here speaking for a conference. If we have not met before and you don't know me, I'm an organizational psychologist and logotherapist, speaker, and author, and my team and I at Gusto Now help companies to enliven and fortify their operations by building a dynamic, high-performance culture and inspirational leadership activated by meaning and purpose. You can learn more about how we can work together at gusto-now.com or my personal site, elisecortez.com. Before we get into today's program, I'm thrilled to announce that registration is now open for a fabulous new conference for women, for which I'll serve as the MC. It's called Thrive in 25 and is a jam-packed few days in Chicago, June 25th through 28th, 2025, designed to develop women as whole selves, from bolstering your mindset to your financial acumen to leadership to incorporating nature and art into your life to raise consciousness and much more. You can visit Thrive-in25, the number, Thrive-in25, for information and to register. Use my promo code GUSTO, all caps, to gain access to the free books and programs I'll be gifting registrants as well. See you there. Now, getting into today's program, we have with us today Eric Gee, who has administered personality-based life coaching for more than 20 years. He built a successful education company that used his personality typing method to better the lives of more than 20,000 students, parents, and teachers. As the creator of the Utopia Project website and the Utopia 16 assessment, he has disseminated his method to over 500,000 users since the website's creation in 2016. His coaching program has been used in companies like Hulu and Disney, universities, and over 40 school districts. He's the author of The Power of Personality, Unlock the Secrets to Understand Everyone in Your Life, including yourself, which we'll be talking about today. He joins us today from Los Angeles. Eric, a very hearty welcome to Working on Purpose.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here, all the way from LA.
I love it. And I got to tell you, brilliant one, I loved reading your book. I thought it was delightful. It had way more personality than any book that I can ever remember, by the way, my friend. And I took 46 pages of typewritten notes because that's how much I got from it.
Yeah. And, I'm sure that not a whole lot of personality types or personality books will mention like the barrel joke and also Robert Ory's last second shot against the Sacramento Kings. But that's just how I roll. That's how I like to write. I want to engage people. I think personality should be fun, because in a sense, we're reading about ourselves and the people around us. And I think that should be fun, right? I mean, people are fun.
They are. I couldn't agree more. Well, you really brought it to life. I was really dazzled by your work. I'm so happy to know you. And we met right here on LinkedIn, which is amazing. So Thank you for saying yes to my invite.
No, thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. Well, we have to start with the obvious question, Eric, and that is, we got to talk about your background and just how you found your way into personality and education. How come not accounting? Why not architecture? What are we doing in personality and education?
Oh gosh, I'm glad that I didn't go into accounting, and I'm sure a lot of people are glad that I'm not their accountant. I started like everything else. It starts when we're young, right? And for me, when I was young, I didn't always feel like I always got along and fit in only because I had to work for it, but at the end of the day, I found the things that I really liked and the things that I valued were maybe a little different than some of my friends, the people around me. And that really got me into studying that people can be different. So that all the different types of personality methodology, right? There's Myers-Briggs / MBTI, the Enneagram, DISC, all those different versions. And I studied that quite a bit, when I was in high school and in college. And then it eventually led to me owning my own education company, and I'd work with maybe 1,000 students a year, as mentioned in the intro. And I through that, I started experimenting and kind of developing the personality typing methodologies that I learned and kind of improving on them. And that's kind of where the book came about, is basically that, just like the culmination of all the research and practical experience that I dealt with working with the education company that I owned.
How did you use your personality methodology in an education format with students?
It's the most important thing is for my teachers. I would definitely teach it to the teachers that work for my company, right? Because teachers tend to be or fall into a specific kind of personality type. And now, of course, I'm throwing out a wide net. That's not every teacher, but a large majority of teachers do. And I felt it was important for them to understand their own bias, right? Like if you're a teacher and you value safety and security, then let's say you meet a student, you have a student who that's not their core value. Their core value is excitement, right? And if you value excitement, then you also like taking risks, right? Because taking a risk is exciting. And the natural instinct for a teacher who values safety and security is to say, be careful, right? But if you tell that to a student who values excitement and risk taking, that basically takes away their power, right? Because their power comes from their ability to take calculated risks. And if you tell them be careful, especially at a young age, they're going to think they're weird or there's something wrong with them. So I would always tell my teachers, tell them to concentrate or tell them to focus. Because essentially that's kind of what you're doing, is telling them, be careful. But it's a different way, right? The way they'll read it is, it's okay for me to be who I am. It's okay for me to take risks. I just have to focus when I do it. And I think that will lend itself to a better learning outcome for that particular student. And that's just one of the many examples that I could take from, my experience there.
No doubt. And also hats off. You say in your book that, here you are, a young, self-proclaimed Asian 27-year-old, I think you said, running this education company. And of course, the students and parents were looking right past you, wanting to know where the boss was. And just want to commend you for just what you birthed, Eric, what you did, what you created, the lives you touched. It's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show, is you're inspiring.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I don't even inspire myself, but I'm glad that I inspired you with my book. And that is a funny story. Yeah. Like when I was 27, I probably looked like I was 21. And what's funnier is my director, who was 5 years younger than me, looked like she was probably a high schooler. And here we were standing trying to tell parents, hey, we can educate your kids and help them grow, and they're just like, yeah, they'd be like, where's your boss? We're going to go on to these. And we always made sure to dress up really nicely, because we're like, we got to dress the part, because people are going to think we're kids. But yeah, thank you for saying all those nice things, though.
You're welcome. You're ahead of your time, and I'm really happy to know you and have you in my circle now. So it really is inspiring to see you just step out there and just go for it anyway. Which brings me to my next question is, what in the world are you doing at Utopia Creative today? I couldn't quite keep track of all the things that were happening in that space, or frankly, all of your amazing interests. You are definitely a Renaissance man. But what are you doing at Utopia Creative?
So Utopia Creative is a space I'm in right now, actually. So right now I'm taking part in this interview, but it's a space where people come to work on whatever projects they have. It's kind of like, I would say, a WeWork for creatives. It's warmer than WeWork and more social, but it's a little bit more productive, I'd say, than just going to a coffee house. We do talk to each other at the end. We have little breakout groups where we kind of talk about what each project everyone's working on. And we kind of lend ourselves support. We have feedback groups. So it's kind of like a mishmash of all the workspaces and writing feedback groups that you have here in LA. And that was pretty much the goal, was to make it a little bit less pretentious, warmer, and more social. Gorgeous.
Love it. That helped a lot, because that's not quite what I understood. So great. Okay, now let's get into the nitty gritty here. I want to help our listeners and viewers learn as much as they can about what you put forth in your book. I thought it was incredibly useful. You're really trying to help us be able to type ourselves, but also other people in our lives. So the first thing that I want to get to is, you very much distinguish method versus theory in your work. So if you can kind of explicate that a bit and to situate what you mean by your focus on method versus theory.
Right. I mean, I think when you think of theory, we think of, these are these ideas and they're always going to work a certain way. But really, my thing is let's take advantage of all the experience that every single person has in their collective consciousness, right? We all meet probably hundreds of thousands of people throughout our lives, right? Maybe small for bits of time, maybe for long amounts of time, but we don't necessarily utilize all that experience. So in my method focuses on taking all of the people that we know and all the things that we've seen and observed, and giving it some kind of intellectual weight, right? Let's say, this person did this, and this is probably the reason why, right? Versus like these theories that people have that are quite objective and may or may not necessarily fit, like versus extroversion and introversion, right? I feel like that's one thing that's really pushed out there. And I feel like it's only relevant like maybe 40 or 50% of the time because it's irrelevant for a specific subset of people. When in fact, if you just ask someone like on a practical level, they'd see, well, I'm extroverted in this situation, but I'm introverted in this situation, right? And so my method focuses more on like focusing on values, because I feel our values definitely are the thing that dictate our behavior and our actions.
Mm-hmm. Totally aligned. I appreciate that. And you also talk about it. Personal tapping is not a science; it's more of a craft. And I really also appreciate that too. And so, we can be miscast in our typing, and people can mistype us, and that's important. The other thing that I want to make sure we situate, I know that you're aligned, is that we're not trying to put people into boxes per se, but we're trying to understand ourselves and each other. And I really like that idea of reaching to understand someone. I think there's so much need in the world for that. And I think your 4 packs that you created, Eric, are just so accessible. And I know you have a reference for and you draw from David Kiersey's work, so I want to honor that. I'm also, I'm a researcher, I'm a social scientist, so I always want to honor those who came before me and the shoulders that I stood upon. So I want to recognize your reverence for him. And let's get into these 4 packs. So ladies and gentlemen, as you listen to Eric talk about these 4 packs, just immediately start thinking about who might that sort of sounds like this person. I just think you make it accessible. So 4 packs: the gatherers, the hunters, the shamans, and the smiths. Who are they? What do they value?
Right. So if you imagine their percentages in our population, they might fit like their percentages in a old medieval village, right? Like you're gonna have a lot more gatherers. So they make about half the population, and they are the ones who value safety and security. So when you think about how our society is run, it's pretty much run in that manner, right? That's why we have laws and order and rules and structure. They're there to make us safe, or at least feel safe, and to secure our place in a kind of dangerous world, right? And so that's half the population. I'd say about a third of the population are the hunters. And just like hunters, they seek out things, right? Hunters value excitement, visceral excitement. They're the people who are like, I want to go on a roller coaster because I think it throws me around, and in throwing me around, it kind of makes me feel like I'm going to die. I know I'm not going to die, but there's a small, tiny percent chance that I might, and that excites me to no end, which is funny because you'd imagine someone who values safety and security would be totally opposite to that, right? They'd be like, why would I want to feel like I'm going to die? Like, I want to feel like I'm not going to die ever, right? And so already you see like one makes 50%, the other makes a third of the population. They're going to clash quite a bit, right? And I think that's the clash that we often associate in pop culture. When you think of the Odd Couple, you think of Bert and Ernie. You think of that like really spontaneous, fun-loving, risk-taking, rogue. And then you think of the steady, secure, responsible, like gatherer type, right? And those are the 2 major packs. And then the shamans, of course, they seek self-knowledge. That's their number 1 value. So I'm sure listeners of this show, and yourself, right? You yourself said you're a shaman. I think we talked about that off the air. And that's kind of, they want to know and learn more about themselves and also teach that to other people. And they really emphasize that. Like, so obviously counselors and psychologists would often fit into this mold. And then the smiths, they seek information. So they would be to the type who all they want is to learn about things. Maybe they're useful. Maybe the things they're learning are not useful, but they just like pulling together information because they just find that exciting. And those are basically the 4 packs in a nutshell.
Thank you, Eric. And I have to say, I think, again, now I know, especially why did I take 46 pages of notes from your book. I do tend to take usually 25 to 28 from books. Yours was 46. And yes, you're right. Guilty as charged. I am very, very interested in, self-identity, self-understanding, helping those know the same. So it helps me to see that, if hunters and gatherers are 85% of the population, and that means that shamans and smiths combined are 15. I have always felt weird and like, a little bit like, I don't, I get all of you, but I'm sort of standing on the outside. I like all of you, most of you, kind of, but I'm totally standing on the outside. And it just really helped me so much, Eric, to really situate why that was so. So I want to personally thank you for how much I got out of your book, just for me.
Oh, that's nice. So nice for you to say that. And you're welcome. I mean, that's why I wrote it. I experienced that same thing. And I realized that it's such a tough thing, especially when you're younger, to feel like weird and left out. And shamans tend to always feel that way. I always say shamans don't have a midlife crisis. Their whole life is a midlife crisis, right? It's just
Yes, definitely. Yeah,
like,
no question.
you know? But then in that regard, like, it's kind of nice, right? Because once we reach middle of a certain age, we're not like reflecting, going, oh my gosh, the things that I've been doing my whole life, was it worth it? Like, I don't know. Like, I spent my whole life not even thinking about that. Where maybe another pack, like maybe a gatherer who kind of took the linear approach because it was more certain and safe, but never thought about whether it really matched them and whether they really enjoyed it. They go in, like, they become like 40 or 45 and they're like, oh my God, like, I think I've lived a life that I don't want anymore. So.
Yeah, it's somebody else's life. Thank you very much.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to dive into which, I'll take a guess as to which pack you're in. But before we do that, let's take our first break, Eric. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We were on the air with Eric Gee, the creator of the Utopia Project website and Utopia 16 assessment. We've been talking a bit about where his fascination with personality came from, how he early developed his capacity and competency for it. We got into the 4 packs of personality. After the break, we're going to dive into the unique organizational and personal skills of each of those packs. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. As I, too, am dedicated to helping create a world where people realize their potential at work, are led by inspirational leaders that help them find and contribute their greatness, and we do business that betters the world. I keep researching and writing my own books. So my last one came out in March of 2023. It's called The Great Revitalization, How Activating Meaning and Purpose Can Radically Enliven Your Business. And I wrote it to help leaders and business owners understand the needs of today's workforce. What do they want and need to give you their best and stick around? And then I provide 22 best practices to help you to create that for them. You can learn more about my books at my website, elisecortez.com, or find them on Amazon. If you are just now joining us, my guest is Eric Gee. He's the author of The Power of Personality, Unlock the Secrets to Understand Everyone in Your Life, including yourself. So as I was going through this, of course, I kept asking myself, which pack and which type is Eric? And I think you are probably in the shaman type because you are like me, because you care about self-identity and self-understanding. But you could be a smith because you've also invented several things. So where are you? Which pack?
So, I mean, I'm always like, go with your first instinct, right? Because you're taking like, different parts of your intuition. So yeah, I'm a shaman. Obviously the book is about self-knowledge and helping people reach self-knowledge. And that was kind of a thing I felt weird, and tried to kind of fit in a little bit as a kid, and that never works out very well, right? And that's something I feel like shamans can really relate to, and we all feel like aliens at a certain point until we learn about these kinds of things. And yeah, I'm a shaman. So and then obviously there are 4 animals within the shaman, and I think we're different animal types or personality types within that pack. But yeah, you were right. Your first instinct was right.
So just to give a little bit of an inkling to that, listeners and viewers. So what Eric has done is he's created the animal types. Under each of the 4 packs have 4 different animal types that really distinguish the kind of paths and what they care about, what they're focused on. It's brilliant. That one page that you capture the whole set of the 16 types, Eric, it's brilliant work. It really is. And I think I am the humpback whale. That's one of them.
Right.
Right. Because I'm a shaman. So the humpback whale is not a smith, right?
No. That's not a smith. Yeah.
Okay.
The humpback whale.
I think that's what I am. Not a baboon. I don't think I'm a baboon. Okay.
Right.
And which are you?
Sorry. I'm a baboon, actually. So
I thought you might be.
Versus a humpback whale. Yeah. And there's just the question I always ask, and it's a really random one. If someone doesn't know whether they're one of the baboon or the humpback whale, I generally ask, like, how many times have you got into a fist fight or started a fight? And that's generally, baboons are a little bit more aggressive. So they might have started plentiful amount of fights, arguments.
One that I can think of. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
probably like humpback whales are definitely going to take it more and more and more, and then they'll just explode. Then at a certain point, they're going to hold it in, and then someone's going to do something, and finally, bam, and they just explode. I think I write in the book like a supernova, and that's like one of the larger differences.
Okay. And you definitely, now that I've read the book and understand, you definitely exhibit more of the colorfulness of the baboon for sure. And especially the way you wrote your personality book, Eric, off the charts. Okay, so let's do this for our listeners and viewers. Let's help them better understand the foundation and organizational skills of each of the 4 packs, starting with the gatherer. So just, if you can kind of walk us through a little bit about, their specific, I think you list 3 foundational skills and 4 organizational skills, but what do they tend to be known for?
I think if I had to just whittle it down to one single thing in terms of the workforce that they're great at, it's logistics. They're fantastic. Not just fantastic, like they're perfect with logistics. Like they're great at knowing the supply count. I know sometimes people are like, oh, that sounds so boring, but it's not. Like there's a reason why we need toilet paper. They are always going to have enough toilet paper in the household. I guarantee you that, and that's their strength, is keeping things together. One of the examples I believe I use in the book is George Washington, right? Oftentimes people think of great generals as being great strategists. Washington himself was not particularly a great strategist. He was a great logistics. And funny enough, that's how he won the Revolutionary War. It wasn't his strategy that helped us win battles. He lost more battles than he won. It was just that he out-survived the British because he was able to keep more of his men alive during the winter here. And they just finally gave up. And that would be a great example of the gatherer strength, right? It's pure logistics and supply, keeping things in order.
Okay. You all had also mentioned social intelligence and being practical. And I can think of several gatherers that I think I know that I think are incredibly practical, very just good at, making sense of things and making things work.
Right. And I will say the difference is oftentimes people associate practical with logical. And that's the big difference. The gatherers are not necessarily logical. They can be, but when push comes to shove, they will be more practical than logical, meaning they will do what works and what has worked in the past, because what worked in the past is more than likely going to work in the present and also going to work in the future. That's always their mindset. Like, why change tradition and why change what's working for some theory that we don't necessarily know, even if it makes like logical sense, it doesn't necessarily, I haven't seen in the real world, so why should I believe it? That's kind of the mindset they often have, where versus a Smith, let's say.
That helps. Now, do you want to say anything about some of their organizational skills, or do you want to go on to the next pack?
I didn't know how wonky you wanted me to get. Their organizational skills, like they tend to, it depends on within each animal. So like I don't know, do you want me to mention the 4 animals to get really into?
Sure, that'd be great.
Yeah, so we have the stags, we have the beavers, we have the, I gotta remember, the elephants and the bears. And their organizational skills are a little different based on which animal. So the stag might be more supervisory. Like they're always the person who follows chain of command. So they're really like, okay, this is what I do. I'm the school principal. I'm the CEO. I'm in charge. You follow me. Don't park in my parking space. My mom was a school principal, and she was a stag. So I definitely know that. I asked her that question once. I'm like, would you get mad if someone parked in your parking spot? And she's like, well, no, because no one would. And I'm like, okay, come on. Like that is exactly what a stag would say. No one's going to in my authority.
Right.
We have the beavers are more, they're more about like supply, like I said, rules focused, and such like that. Like each one has their own individual strengths, even within the overall skill set of logistics, I'd say.
Okay. All right. So listeners and viewers, one of the things that Eric sent too that I really want to encourage you to pick up the book for is he's also even included some good fit positions and careers for each of the personality types, or his types, which I think is really useful. I found myself right in there, by the way, Eric, you totally nailed it. Well, let's talk about the hunter next. And again, it also helped me. I have 2 of my friends that I know are spot on hunters now that you've helped me elucidate that. So what would be their foundational skills?
So I always say their foundational skill is tactics, meaning like the ability to adjust to whatever situation is best in this moment. And the great thing too, like depending on the sector you're in, there's a lot of different roles within each sector that could work for different like personalities, right? Like it's not like, oh, are you in you're in tech, okay, you're going to be this type. It's like, no, like in tech, even in tech, like I found there's something called, I believe they're called the knock, and those are the people who work kind of like 24/7. So they have some have the graveyard shift, and it's like when a website gets shut down, like Hulu, when there's a glitch, obviously you need someone to fix that glitch right away, because you never know.
Hands on deck.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want that glitch. And so that's called the knock. And they're like kind of like the SWAT team members in the software arena. And those would be hunters, right? Hunters have to just go into a situation without necessarily knowing what the situation is, and then just be confident enough to adjust. Obviously, firefighters would be probably the greatest example of a hunter. They go into situations where their lives are in danger and they don't know what's coming at them. And they just have to be confident that they're going to be able to do the best thing in that moment. And that's kind of their job strength.
Okay, and then do you want to say the four animals for the hunters? I know one's a peacock.
The peacocks. So there's the peacocks, butterflies, foxes, and sharks. And I think we can distinguish the foxes and sharks over here, and the peacocks and the butterflies over here. And that peacocks and butterflies are a lot more about consuming and creating works of art and works of beauty. Now that can be very like subjective, right? A work of beauty could be something like a great meal, or a great performance, or maybe they could be an interior designer, like things where they are viscerally affected by their surroundings. They're very sensitive to that. Where the foxes and the sharks are a lot more like aggressive in their risk taking. They're adrenaline junkies. They're going to be a lot more based on taking risks, which is why when they're younger, they can't have teachers telling them that it's bad to take risks. They have to have teachers telling them, no, take your risks, just
totally get it.
When you do. Yeah.
So exciting. I know, I can totally know two of my friends that are hunters, and they're married. I married them, and they're totally hunters. He's definitely a shark and she's a peacock. It's like amazing.
What do they do?
Okay.
I was just wondering what they did for a living and if it fit. Like, I'm always curious.
Well, they're both. He's been a very strong entrepreneur, like blaze trails, like just hack down the forest to create something out of nothing, and like unstoppable, man. And she has this incredible aesthetic sense to her, and has created beautiful artwork and websites, and just stunning stuff.
Yeah, I always describe hunters in the workforce, and I'm saying this as a compliment, but hunters are hustlers. They're the hustler.
Yeah, totally hustlers. Yeah,
they don't go the safe route. They just have confidence and like, oh, what are we gonna do? I'll just make something up of myself. Which is why oftentimes in school they don't necessarily do as well, because school is just really not for them. At least traditional school. They're just like, I don't care about the stuff I'm reading in a book. Just get me out there, and I'll figure it out. I'll fall on my face and pick myself back up and learn from that. So
Yeah, I love this. This is so good. So listeners and viewers, think about this. If you're starting to recognize, that sounds like me, if this is just stuff really helps. So now we talk about the third pack. That's the shamans. That's us. So our foundational skill is?
It is, empathy and obviously diplomacy, understanding like what someone is feeling, obviously, because we're so connected with our own feelings, and basically understanding how the best way someone can grow, the best way that we can grow. And not only that, but how we can grow together, right? How can we work? How can teams mesh? They're also about morale. I mean, you're going to find them in HR quite a bit. HR is a big thing for shamans, because they're all about helping people become the best version of themselves. And obviously within a company, how can this person become the best version of themselves? Because that best version will help the company, and how will they fit into the company in the best possible way, right? Like you wouldn't want like a shaman being in charge of supply and logistics. That would be the worst situation for them. They're like, wait, what?
For everybody.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really, you don't want them doing your taxes either. I don't do my own taxes. I would be terrible at it. I would be audited like that, So that's our skill set, tends to be working with people for the most part.
Okay. And again, let's talk about the four animal types there.
Yes, so they're the dolphins and the pandas, and I usually separate them. The dolphins and the pandas over here, the baboons and the humpback whales. You and me, we're over on this side, and I usually just describe them as the big difference being humpback whales and baboons are more about principle and ethics, and the dolphins and the pandas are more about people. And obviously, as shamans, we're going to like both of those things. But when push comes to shove, I think dolphins and pandas tend to be more communal. They're all about building community and working with individuals for the greater good of the whole. And whereas like baboons and humpback whales are more about like, what are my ideas? What are the principles that we can advocate for? How can we get them out there? How can we voice them without necessarily organizing communities of people?
Yeah. Why am I down here in McAllen speaking at a conference? Because I want to spread those ideals. I am out to create destination workplaces. I want a world, Eric, where people come alive at work, not where they are deadened by work. That is what I'm out to champion. So I'm guilty as charged, and I'm happy to carry the sword.
And that's super inspirational, right? It's inspirational and aspirational, right? And shamans were all like that, where it's like, we want to inspire people, but we want to inspire them to higher goals versus like, make as much money as you can. It's like, money's great, but like, you don't want to make money doing something you hate, because then you basically wasted your life and that ain't coming back, right? Like it's about how can we reach the best possible version of ourselves, because it's probably going to make us the happiest.
I completely agree. And I've been willing to take the road less traveled to realize that and to live that. And I'm grateful for that. Okay, so now let's talk about the smiths, the skills of the smiths. So what's their foundational skill?
So their foundational skill is strategy. And I always say like basically they create things, tools or systems that will help us in the future, maybe at the cost of the present, right? So then the most common to maybe take a few hits, because that's essentially what strategy is, right? Strategy is really thinking about future goals or future gain for possible short-term loss, which is funny because that's the exact opposite of tactics, even though we often like associate those two things as being the same, but they are the mirror opposite of the hunters. Hunters are all about the now, and they're like, well, screw later, because we don't even know when later comes, what's going to happen. So let's just do what works now. Whereas smiths are always about planning ahead and thinking, okay, what's going to happen in the future? What can we do now to set us up best for the future, even if it hurts us now? And I think in the book I mentioned the marshmallow test, right? They are the winners of the marshmallow test, because they will wait for that big result at the end versus what's like I guess you'd say the present day gain. Yeah.
Okay. I love that. So well explained. And I know several smiths. I've fallen in love with at least one smith that I know of. And those four animals are?
That's generally a good match. Smith.
Yeah, I know. I saw that in your book. I read that. Don't think it's gotten past me.
No. And that's what a lot of people want to know, this stuff, right? They say, who should I hook up with? Who should I really like? You know, I'm not a big believer I don't believe in like soulmates per se, but you know, theoretically certain types are going to gel. The way that they gel together is more conducive generally in the long run. But yeah, so we have the killer whales and the spiders, and they're on this side. And then we have the chimpanzees and owls on this side. And since since all smiths seek information, the way I divide the two is by how they go about seeking that information and what do they want it for. So chimpanzees and owls just think information is cool. So they love going on Wikipedia, and they'll just read every single Wikipedia page and then link. It could be about professional wrestlers in the 1980s, and they'll just be like, okay, Hulk Hogan, Ultimate Warrior, whereas the killer whales and the spiders, they're more about information that's useful, right? So they're probably not going to get on that, go down that rabbit hole of professional wrestling in the 80s. But what they're going to do is they're going to look for information that they can use, which means they tend to be better students, especially in college. They tend to be your best students. But once again, since they're all about strategy, they're all about creating structures in which society can thrive. So the CEO type, killer whales are often called the CEO type because a lot of CEOs are killer whales, even though they make up about 2% of the population. They probably make up about 30% of CEOs, which is a pretty large amount.
So well explained. I just so appreciate this. Now, I think I've been saying your name wrong. How do we say your name correctly?
Oh, yeah, it's like G, like it's like a gangster in the early 90s.
Eric G, not G, Eric G.
Yeah, like nothing.
Gotcha. We can make that switch.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take our last break. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We're on here with Eric Eric G.
Yeah.
Eric G. He's the creator of the Utopia Project website and the Utopia 16 assessment. We've been talking now more in depth about the 4 packs. What is it that they really value? What are their skills? What distinguishes them? After the break, we're going to talk a little bit more about how to recognize these 4 packs and why doing so actually helps relationships and results. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I am your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. As I mentioned in the last break, my latest book came out in March of 2023. It's called The Great Revitalization, How Activating Meaning and Purpose Can Radically Enliven Your Business. And what I did for you is I created a 3-page assessment you can download off my site to help you ascertain the extent to which your current culture meets the discerning needs of today's workforce. You can find it at gusto-now.com. If you are just tuning in, my guest is Eric Yee. He's the author of The Power of Personality, Unlock the Secrets to Understand Everyone in Your Life, including yourself. So for this last part here, I just wanted to spend this time, Eric, just talking about, how can we recognize these 4 packs with people that we're working with? And maybe it's a friend, a prospective person you might want to date, and help us really understand why doing so helps the relationship and what you're ultimately trying to achieve in life.
Right. The story I've been telling quite a bit in terms of why it's so important is, I was shucking oysters with my cousin's kid this New Year's. And I was asking, he had just graduated from pharmacy school. And so I was like, whoa, so what do you want to do now? And I already know he's a hunter. He's a shark. Sharks like to use tools. That's probably something I forgot to mention. Like hunters really are good with tools. And for sharks, they're very good with actual literal tools, like a hammer, a nail, And so we're shucking oysters and I was teaching him and he picked it up really quickly. And so anyway, I digress. So I said, what do you want to do now? And he's like, I don't know, as long as I don't have to be in the same place all day long. I'm like,
yeah, right.
You went to pharmacy school. Pharmacists stay in the same place. And so I was like, well, maybe you could do pharmaceutical sales because that would involve traveling, going to different places, meeting different people. You'd have to hustle. You'd have to you're not going to have some steady kind of thing. It's going to be based on how well you do, but hunters are fine with hustling. They don't mind that. In fact, it's kind of fun for them. It's exciting. And I gave him that suggestion and I think he was good to take it. First he said, he's like, well, I don't want to waste all the time that I spend in pharmacy school learning this stuff. And I was like, well, yeah, but you only got one life. So do you really want to waste that? You're not getting that back. And he's like, oh yeah, you have a good point there. So I think if he had known that going in and if I had a chance to talk to him now, I knew that he was a shark before he started pharmacy school, but hey, it's none of my business. I didn't say anything. His mom is a pharmacist. His dad's a doctor. They're both gatherers. So they're kind of their mindset, of course, is that gatherer mindset of we got to do it safe and secure. What's a safe job? Yep. Pharmacist is a safe job. Go to pharmacy school, do that path. But I don't think that's the path that's going to make him happy or to the amount of success that you probably want. I think he'd do really well in pharmaceutical sales because that's kind of the C-suite path, right? And I could see him doing that. So that's a long story of saying that's why it's so important. I feel like we take these paths and we're just we diagnose something and we're like, okay, this is what I am. I'm just going to do this. But what if the diagnosis is wrong? I think once we figure out what that is and find the right path, at least it'll give us confidence as we move forward.
Yeah, that's a brilliant story. And Eric, I really appreciate that. I mean, I have a 21-year-old daughter. She just graduated Baylor with a degree in psychology, which I think was a good field for her to study. And, she's trying to find her way. And a lot of well-meaning people along the way have encouraged her to go be a surgeon, go be a dentist and go all these things. And I'm like, hang on a second. You're the one that's got to, do this job and get up every day and slog through it. Let's get it right. So how, I can look back in my earlier years, when I did a lot of outside sales. And I love the relational component to it. And I love the service and I love I didn't ever sell anything that was, tangible. It was always intangible stuff. I needed that sort of ideological, conceptual aspect of it. But what I'm wondering for our listeners and viewers, we're probably going to think about this themselves. Do you, from your research and your experience, do people's personalities change or evolve over time? Or is it pretty much the same and maybe differently expressed?
I definitely agree with it evolving, right? I mean, essentially it changes, but I always this is something I say in the book as well. I don't think people can change, at least not for the good. I think if you're changing who you are, then that's probably you've become less emotionally healthy. But I think we can grow, and we can grow into better versions of ourselves, or we can grow into worse versions of ourselves, right? Like puppies don't grow into cats, they grow into dogs, right? So if you start off a certain way, you're not going to change into a different animal, but what you could do is grow into a older, more mature or evolved version of the one that you started off being. That's kind of what I believe. And the danger is if we believe in changing, then essentially what that means is a lot of types, especially the more minority types where they only make up 2% of the population, they're in danger of changing to be something they're not, because either their parents or like people who have a great influence on them are telling them what they're doing is wrong and they need to change. That's what I'm most afraid of by saying that. So
I really appreciate that. And that makes so much sense when you just look at the sheer volume that is, against people that are in a 2%, sort of category. I can recognize pretty early in my life some of my shaman tendencies. I can recognize that. And I would say, to your point about evolving, I would say that especially when I really chose to step on the path of truth, I was choosing truth to myself. And it did take me into a much deeper self-employed path, because really I don't want to work for somebody else's ideas. That's why I work for myself. So I can recognize that. And that really also gave me a lot of affirmation and appreciation that I had followed that path. So I appreciate that the evolving piece of the personalities. And then to say, just to help some of the other types in recognizing, you've done such a great job at helping to distinguish gatherers, hunters, shamans, smiths. Can you kind of think about your other stories that would help somebody recognize, oh yeah, I'm definitely a smith?
Well, smiths, just like shamans, smiths have that kind of like, gosh, I'm like kind of weird, aren't I? However, their reaction is different than ours, and which with good and bad results, right? Just like everything with personality, right? Take the good with the bad, bad with the good. Smiths will be like, wow, I'm different than these people, and they're idiots. So why would I want to be like that? I'm going to be myself, right? And of course, that's kind of cool, right? It's like, wow, that's really strong. That's like a very cool kind of take. However, if you have that attitude with the most people, then you're going to be like the recluse, right? Or you're going to be like the person who might be thought of as a jerk, right? Like I think of like, I use a lot of pop culture. Obviously, you read the book. Like I think of like the show House, right? Where he's a smith. He's more specifically a chimpanzee, and nobody likes him, right? Because he's kind of arrogant and he's always like, no, these guys are idiots. I'm going to do my thing and I don't need to be like anyone else. But sometimes it's to his detriment, right? Where he doesn't fully connect with people. He doesn't fully understand what people are. And I think that would be a good indicator if someone knows that they're a smith, is that where they feel different, but in an almost antagonistic way. And I mean, that's a small percentage of the population, but if you're reading Wikipedia quite a bit, and if you're a big collector of things, oftentimes you're a smith. They have like specific interests that they're very proud of that are not necessarily the most popular interests. Like I have a friend who's an owl, and a good example of an owl is like Einstein. The problem is when you tell people, oh, Einstein was a smith, they're like, oh, what you're saying is smiths are geniuses. And I'm like, no, Einstein was a genius. He happened to be a smith. But there are other smiths who just like information. And a friend of mine is like, hey, I'm the same type as Einstein, but that doesn't mean like I'm a genius. That just means that I know a lot about fantasy football and I know a lot about massage, because those are the two things that I'm really interested in, right? And I think that's a good way to figure out if you're a smith. If you just love that information, like finding it, and you're not ashamed about doing it, that would be, that's the way to find out.
Well, and then again, I think your guidance in your book about where that might show up as a career is just so incredibly useful. So we won't go into a lot of that. Just ladies and gentlemen, pick up the book. It's amazing. Think about how you can use this for yourself, loved ones in your life, people on your team. So, if you're a smith, there's lots of ways you can use this personality. And what I really want to situate here for our listeners and viewers is that we are talking about honoring our personalities, honoring who we are. And the opportunity is to figure out, where do we make that work in the world? How do we make that work in the world? Not how do we change ourselves, but where do we bring that so that we can really bring it strong and honor who we are through it?
Right. And it's about, I think the best thing is identifying, like either whether it's in fiction or real life, like models of success, right? Models like, oh, this person is like actually like me. This person has this personality. That means I don't have to change because this person didn't have to change. Like someone who thinks they're a jerk might look at Steve Jobs and go, hey, you know what? He was thought of as a jerk as well, but he made the iPhone, so like they can use that as like, okay, like it worked for him, it worked for her. let me like, it's okay to be myself. I just need to work on that and be a better version of myself.
Mhm. So let's talk a little bit more about gatherers. How might they recognize themselves? I know that you say their number one value is security. So I would certainly, imagine that people who like the steady work, the steady paycheck, might fall into that category. I have been self-employed for most of 20 years. And so I haven't recognized that steady paycheck. It would be really nice once in a while, but that so isn't what governs me. So say a little bit more for our gatherers, how they might recognize themselves.
Yeah, gatherers actually, they're the one type when I work with them as my clients and students that I never really have to worry about giving them confidence in themselves, just because if you're a gatherer, you basically have always felt like the world was made for you, but not like in some entitled way. It's more just like, oh, okay, like the things that I like are the things that we should like, because it's been structured in a way that just fits right. It's like just putting on a shoe and you're just like, wow, this fits perfectly. So in a weird way, gatherers might not know that they're gatherers unless they have that feeling of, they've never had the feeling of not belonging. Like it's a weird kind of like, oh, they don't know how other people don't feel that way. So I'm always trying to teach my gatherer students that no, learn about the personality type so you can understand like that other people are different and you should be able to adjust to those differences, versus like being confident in like what you're doing, because most of the time gatherers are pretty confident in how they go about the world.
Eric, that is so gold, to just think about it from that vantage point. It's just like the water they swim in, and that water is the large pond that most people, swim in as well. So they are among really good company and, really nice friends. And, this just makes sense. And so that really helps. And for, those of us who are shamans and smiths who make it more of 15% of the population combined, it helps us better understand, why we have often, stood on the edge of that pond wondering, should we put a foot in there, or maybe should we leave it right where it is? Right. So I just think your work is brilliant. We have just really a couple of minutes left here, and I want to give you the chance to kind of close the show as you like, Eric, knowing that people listen to the show from around the world, and they really care about becoming a better version of themselves, becoming a better leader. They want to create organizations where people can realize their potential, and they do better through what they're doing through their work and their organization. What would you like to leave them with?
I like to leave them with the fact, I like that you mentioned before, it's not about categorizing. It's not about putting people into boxes. I think the method is like something that we can constantly live with, right? Like I always think of like this story, Franny and Zoe from J.D. Salinger, where the main character is just like repeating this Jesus prayer over and over again because she thinks repeating it over and over again is going to make her a holier person. But the epiphany she gets at the end is no, like it's not about saying it. It's about living it within your actions in life, right? And I think that's the same thing with this. It's not about like it's not just about understanding the differences in people and what make us different. It's about living that way, where we're constantly, everything that we see from our loved ones or just the people around us, we're constantly trying to understand what it really means. We're trying to get a deeper perspective of who they are, because I think that will lead to just a better society and just a happier life. And I think so much of what we think of what people are is based on such surface values. But if we were just to like make that how we live our life, just figuring out what all these things genuinely mean, that's my aspiration, is that if we were to do that.
I really appreciate that, Eric. And I would also, put forth that my contribution to that is, in addition, I want everyone to appreciate and respect other people for who they are and for their difference. I think the world would be a lot better place if we could drop some, a lot of the conditioned judgment and look for curiosity, appreciation, and respect.
Right. People are a lot
different. My 2 cents.
Yeah. Right.
Go ahead. People are a lot different.
Oh, I was just saying we're a lot different. I think that's the thing. That's why I focus so much on values. I think oftentimes we associate, when someone says, "Oh, people are different," it's like, yeah, they're different because they're like a little bit more spontaneous. I'm more organized. It's like, that might be true, but there are deeper differences. And I think as long as we accept that values are different, that's when real change matters, because I think those are things that can often be a hang up, right? When we're like, oh no, we both value family. We both that, and it's like, well, that person might not value family as much as you value family, right? Like, when's the last time you heard about Einstein's family, right? He had a daughter, but no one's heard about it because he spent most of his time, doing research, right? So, yeah.
Well, Eric, I'm definitely better by having encountered you, and I really, really am a fan of your work. I am happy to share it and celebrate it. Listeners and viewers, you are going to want to learn more about Eric, his work with Utopia Project, as well as his work on the personality, the Utopia 16. So one place you can start to look for him is his website, which is utopiaproject.com. Let me spell that for you. So it's YOU, Topia, TOPIA, project.com, utopiaproject.com. Definitely go check him out. Connect with him on LinkedIn. Last week, if you missed the live show, you can catch it via recorded podcast. We were on air with Dr. Andy Malinsky talking about the importance of and how to be effective at cross-cultural relationships in communication, a must-have skill in today's global marketplace. Next week, we'll be on air with Colin O'Neill talking about his new book, Take Control by Giving Up Control, the value-centered fast track for organizational growth. See you then, and for another inspiring and educational conversation on working on purpose. And remember, work is one of the best adventures and means of realizing our potential and making the impact we crave. So let's work on purpose.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's program. Be sure to tune into Working on Purpose, featuring your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, each week on W4CY. Together, we'll create a world where business operates conscientiously, leadership inspires impassioned performance, and employees are fulfilled in work that provides the meaning and purpose they crave. See you there. Let's work on purpose.